Hello, my name is Dante Baker, and welcome back to Basics. After a full year of no in-person coffee classes, we figured it would be beneficial for us to return to our roots and discuss some of the coffee brewing basics. The entire reason we started Sustain was because we noticed that there was a lack of understanding on coffee. This absence of knowledge stemmed from a lack of education, and the education resources we did see were not exactly benevolent in nature. This led to us to realize many in our community were reluctant to ask questions about coffee because they were either intimidated or fearful of looking foolish. We realized that coffee can be incredibly intimidating, and we don't think it should have to be that way. Join us as we review some basic coffee principles. These are fundamental concepts that are necessary for nearly all facets of coffee brewing. No matter where you are on your coffee brewing journey, we hope this can help in putting your best foot forward. Last episode, we went over some key principles that will help you purchase a good bag of coffee. But unfortunately, none of that matters. Why is that? Because before you can enjoy a good bag of coffee, you need the right equipment. What kind of equipment do you need? Yeah, sure, there's a lot of options, but for the core pieces that you should consider are the Burr grinder, the scale, Goose-neck kettle, and the drippers and filters. When brewing coffee, we like to think of nearly everything as a variable in science. This being said, the tighter that we can control a said variable, the more consistent and hopefully tastier our results will be. When working with specialty coffee, we want to use a specific type of grinder, known as a Burr grinder. The Burr refers to the type of blades, the aids that the grinder uses. With grinders that use Burr blades, the coffee is broken down far more uniform than that of a standard blade grinder. You know, the Mr. Coffee grinder with the two blades that doesn't do that. Think of the Burr grinder as like a pepper grinder. When peppercorns are ground, the size impacts the flavor, and ground coffee is the same. Grind size is an important variable because it is connected to time. This is logical for us to think of because coffee grounds that are coarse will cause water to travel through the coffee quickly. Accordingly, a fine grind will slow the rate of water that passes through the coffee. But why is that important? Because it has a direct relationship with extraction. Controlling the variable of grind is the simplest way to see immediate improvements in the consistency of the grind size. We are not going to tell you what grind size to use today, but we will say that using a good grinder is the best place to start, apart from using good coffee, that is. But what grinder does one buy? We really like Barista for home grinders. Their customer support is next level, as well as the fact that they offer refurbished grinders for reduced prices. We recommend checking out Encore and Sete series of grinders for the entry-level options. If you are not opposed to manual labor, try a hand grinder, Hario or Portlex. Both make excellent options that are in sub $100 range. Of course, when making coffee, it is incredibly important to weigh everything, especially when we are trying to improve consistency. Using a simple scale that measures things in grams to weigh our coffee, dosages, water, and outages is a simple but powerful habit to get into. Going back to the first part of the series where we talked about ratios, the scales is the best way for us to stay consistent with each cup we brew, meaning it helps us know how much coffee and water to use, as well as keeping track of how many minutes our brew should be. For scales, there are not really that many options. The tried and true is the Hario scale, as it runs on a AAA battery and has a built-in timer, and perfect for anyone on a budget. We also are big fans of the Black Mirror scales, as well as the Akaye line of scales. Know that the more money you spend and the fancier of options you get, but sometimes those options are not for everyone or even necessary. So consider that when you're looking for your scale. When brewing specialty coffee pour over, we want to use a kettle that has a gooseneck. If coffee is brewed with a more standard wide neck, there will naturally be a higher amount of agitation, which will directly impact extraction. Whereas when using a gooseneck kettle, we can be more accurate with our water flow rate, thus helping us have more direct control over our agitation. Too much agitation will often result in over-extraction, so the tighter we can control the variable, the more evenly extracted our cup can be. Kettles really range in their type and price. Of all pieces of equipment, this is the most scalable, meaning you could spend anywhere from $50 to $250 here, depending on the style. The main thing to note is electrical versus stovetop. Electrical options are more pricey, but you can be more precise, with some electrical models having a temperature gauge to set an exact water temperature. Stovetop kettles will require you to boil water, then allow it to cool, which of course takes longer. Finally, we have our drippers along with their respective filters. The main three would be the Kalita, the V60, and Chemex. There are many other niche drippers out there, each with their own nuance, angles, and filter types, but for the sake of conversation, and to not make this video any longer, we will only focus on the main three. The Kalita is likely the most different of the three, since it uses a flat bottom design with the Wade filters. It also comes in two different sizes, the 155 and the 185. The 185 is the more common of the two.
The pros of the Kalita Wave. Due to the flat bottom, there's usually an even amount of extraction. It's good at bringing out the fruity natures of coffee and even the florals that a coffee may offer. It's also good for a wide range of coffee regions, but there's some cons about the Kalita Wave. It's prone to choke, which means it's also prone to over-extract. And it's kind of difficult to master, I would say, and requires a pretty specific pouring technique. Dante, with the Kalita, what's your approach with it usually?
All right, with the Kalita Waves, I use more options, say a Colombian or Costa Rican, and I find that the Kalita Wave has a slower drip rate, which I think helps to incorporate the taste of these regions. So what I like to do is I pour straight down the middle, get like middle, because of the three flat bottom. I want to make sure I, use the three holes, and then after I let that sit for about 30 to 40 seconds. And usually my pour is a lot delicate.
Like me.
But with the Kalita, I like to be a little bit rougher, starting around the edges until I get to the center. And usually I end it around like 4 minutes or 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Check out the Kalita Way Brew Guide video that I did.
Yeah, you can check that out on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And the website.
Go check it out.
Go check it out. You'll like it.
But on to the V60. The V60 gets its name because of its 60-degree angle with rich edges and thinner filter. The V60 is popular in many individual brew kits. The beloved V60 is a staple in most coffee lovers' brew kits. With its initial simplistic that can be quickly be turned into a deep, intuitive brewing experience, it's easy to see why many reach for it when brewing.
Which brings us to the V60 Pros. They have really thin filters, which allow for fast brewing times, and they can also handle aggressive pouring, and it requires less technique. But that's not to say that it's an easy method. One con about the V60 is that with every coffee, it's not typically good for every coffee to shine on it. It also tends to bring out one flavor note instead of multiple. So if it's like caramel, chocolate, and honey, it might only bring out the chocolate. It's only also harder to hone in on grind size, especially kind of depending on which flavor that you're really trying to highlight. So of those, 3 flavors, if you want to highlight the honey note, you might have to mess around with your grind size a lot more. So with that, what are your approaches on brewing with the Kalita?
Yep.
Or the
V60. That's it. Well, personally, I go for a lot of more vibrant options, like an Ethiopian or a Kenyan with a lot of fruitier notes.
African.
Oh, yeah, like me. Most of these coffees have a more fruit-filled taste to them. So what I usually like to do, before you should brew this, you should always wet your filter. That's not important to V60. That's just know to do that.
All methods, yeah.
So usually what I do is in the opposite of the Kalita, I start on the sides and I go in like a circular motion around the ridges and get to the middle. And I'll let that sit for about 10 seconds with the brew time. Yeah.
That's pretty fast. 10 seconds. That's pretty fast bloom, like 10, 15 seconds. Kind of what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, I figure with the bigger hole,
Yeah.
then it'd be a lot, quicker as far as like
True.
the extraction process would be a lot quicker. And so what actually I do is this is what I was talking about when I say delicate nature. So what I do is like slowly pour in the center and around the edges. Make sure you get all the edges incorporated.
Yeah.
And I'll let that sit for about like 4 minutes.
Okay.
Finally, we have the Chemex, the elegant looking one that utilizes dense filters, high dosage, and long brew times. For those who enjoy what could be considered a clean cup, this method is the go-to. Chemex pros and cons.
So the pros is that it usually has an ultra clean cup due to this really dense filter. It also can feed a crowd because it's really large. You can use high dosages in it. And it's also pretty simple to brew with. There's lots of room to experiment with it as well, I would say. Some of the cons though is that there are lengthy brew times, and sometimes there's upwards of 8 minutes on like a really good high dosed Chemex. And sometimes it can extract too many of the oils, and make the cup too light. And it also does require higher dosing because it's so much room here that you don't want to use a lower dose because it kind of just mitigates the whole reason that you're using this giant filter and this giant method.
Of course.
I can kind of tell you how I brew through Chemex since you shared how you brew in Kalita and V60. I typically like to aim for those really long brew times, so I will go a bit finer than maybe what other people will go for. I really use almost a V60 grind size on Chemex rather. It's because I really want to accentuate that long brew time and get the most out of it. I tend to use no less than 30 grams of coffee when I'm using the Chemex, especially if I'm using one like this. This is the 10 cup size. We should note that the Chemex does come in 3 sizes. It comes in a 3 cup, a 6 cup, and a 10 cup. The 10 cup is probably the most standard for a lot of people. The ones with the handles usually are the 10 cup models. I like the 6 cup one personally, but 10 cup is pretty standard. But anyway, so fine grind size-ish, kind of like the V60. I also like to utilize a lot of agitation, so I will agitate the bloom, I'll agitate midway, and then I'll also agitate once more when I've reached my final pour. And very specifically on that final pour, I'll do a full stir clockwise and then a full stir counterclockwise. Don't really ask me why, it's just my approach. But I find that whenever you swirl it in that way, that it makes the draw down time come quicker, because at that point I'm probably already at like 5.5, 6 minutes, and I don't want it to be like 12 minutes. So doing that final stir really helps take all of those grounds that are kind of floating around the top and forces them back down to the bottom to end the brew. So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope that this brief discussion helped you to learn the core pieces of equipment you need to get started with brewing coffee at home. When writing this script, we felt a bit weird returning to the roots simplistically, but we want you to know that we are unafraid to cover these most fundamental of topics. Thanks for watching. Hit the bell, comment, and don't forget to subscribe.